Hi, my name is Elysia and today I'm gonna share 5 easy steps on how to get started with photography. Starting out with photography can be quite overwhelming because there's just a lot of stuff to know. At least that's how it was for me, and I had no idea where to begin. So now that I've spent some years trying to figure it out, I thought it might be helpful to some beginners to make a video that showed kind of the essentials that you need to know in order to get started. The things you need to learn, the equipment you need, just like the basics. I've just put my tips into 5 easy steps to kind of make it a little bit more digestible. And also I think it's a good idea to maybe scribble some stuff down as I'm talking, because if you're truly just starting out, there will be some words that you may have never heard before and you need to write them down so that you can look them up afterwards and start learning about those words. But without further ado, let's get started. The first step is motivation. It seems a little bit silly, you just want to take some cool photos, right? Well, you can skip this one, but I encourage you to stick around, because knowing what you want to take photos of and why you want to will just make your learning curve a lot faster, because you can learn a lot more focused, if that makes sense. Let's use me as an example. When I first started out in photography, I knew that I wanted to do conceptual stuff, because that's really why I thought photography was cool, because I saw other photographers who did conceptual stuff, and in that way I quickly knew that I had to learn how to do conceptual photos. So I didn't have to learn about landscape photography or portrait photography or any other kind. I just could kind of focus in on that one thing. And it also meant that I actually could start out by creating conceptual photographs from the very get-go. So I didn't just grab lots of meaningless photos. I kind of did what I wanted to do later in the beginning, if that makes sense. It didn't mean that it was a good conceptual photograph, because it was not at all, but it just meant that it made my learning curve a little bit faster, I think. And also, it doesn't mean that you can't change your opinion or that you can't do multiple stuff. I still do some portraits of other people sometimes, but it just means that that is kind of your main thing, if that makes sense. So you can still do other stuff and learn how to do other stuff, but in the beginning you really want to focus on one thing, I think, just to make it more simple for yourself. If you don't know what kind of photography you want to get into, I would probably recommend just looking up the different kind of photography there is and maybe see what you find intriguing, if there is something that is more interesting than the other things there is. And if you already are following some photographers on, let's say, Instagram or something like that, which you probably are since you're interested in photography, then look at what kind of photography they're doing and maybe you want to do the same. Maybe that's why you're interested in what they're doing. I don't know. Let's get on to the next step. Okay. All the gear, but not the gear. Can we just very quickly agree that that is really not what we want? It's just embarrassing. I think, at least, and I really hope you agree, that it's way cooler to be a photographer that is great but almost has no gear than to be a photographer with a lot of expensive gear and all that stuff but doesn't know how to take photos. So with that mindset, I could really just be telling you that you don't need no gear at all, like everyone is, and you can just use your iPhone. There's actually an app for your iPhone called Lightroom where you can go in and actually use the same settings as if it was a real camera and shoot raw and all that stuff. And you can do that, especially if you're doing conceptual stuff and mostly shooting for yourself, you can. And maybe I would recommend it in the beginning if you don't have the money. But if you do have the money to go out and buy a camera, I also would recommend that you do it, because there just is a lot of a difference. And let's say that in the previous step you chose that you wanted to do portrait photography. Then your plan is probably that you're gonna charge people to shoot them when you get better, and you can't really charge anyone if you're just shooting with your iPhone. It just doesn't seem very trustworthy. But if you're doing conceptual stuff in the beginning, like I was, I think I could have started out with my phone if I didn't have a camera. But it also just is a lot nicer to work with a camera. So if you have the money, I really would recommend spending the money on a camera, because you can play more with the settings and the photos just does look a lot nicer and more pro in a sense. So I think my advice is that if you don't have the money, use your iPhone. Don't let it stop you from creating ever. But if you have the money, I also would recommend spending it on a camera. What camera to use? What camera to get? I use the DSLR, the Canon EOS 600D, I think it's called. Yeah, and I actually just upgraded. I have been using my Canon EOS 600D for up until yesterday. Actually, I just got a new camera yesterday and I'm very happy about it. It's the one I'm recording on right now. But all my photos, or if you've been watching my videos or my photos before this, everything is shot on that DSLR camera. So you don't really need to upgrade very soon again if you go for DSLR. It is really good quality and basically all you need. If you want to upgrade, I would first go for buying a tripod. If you want to take self-portraits maybe, then a tripod is pretty helpful. After that, I would buy a remote trigger. You can buy one for pretty cheap. If you have a camera that actually has Wi-Fi built in, you can use that. You don't need a remote trigger. I just got one that has that and it's so nice. I haven't tested it out for self-portrait yet, but I can't wait to do it. So maybe that would be a tip when you're looking for buying a new camera, to actually go for a camera that has built-in Wi-Fi if you want to take self-portraits like I do. It just is very helpful. It has been a pain in the ass still trying to get focus and stuff like that without being able to see what you're capturing. Let's move on to the next step. Third step is to learn the basics. First, you need to know how to operate your camera in manual. Hey! The Siri just pop up on your phone sometimes without you saying her name or anything like that. She does on my phone pretty often and I think it's kind of creepy. But yeah, the first thing you need to learn is how to operate your camera in manual mode. There's actually only 3 things that you need to know in order to operate your camera in manual mode, but you also need to know these 3 things very well. You have to be able to say what it is in your sleep if I wake you up in the middle of the night or something like that. And those 3 things are ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. I don't want to get too much into what it actually is because then this video would be very long. I might do a video just on that one day, but otherwise you can click the link that I have in the description box below or just do a quick Google search in these terms and you will find hundreds of articles that will explain it to you. And it's really just a matter of first reading about it and then just using it over and over again, and at some point it will just feel very natural, I think. If you are starting out on your phone, you can download the Lightroom app and it actually allows you to use ISO, shutter speed and aperture the same way as you would on a real camera, if that makes sense. And you can also shoot in RAW, which is basically a file that it has a lot of more information. So when you're editing, you can pull up the shadows a lot more and pull down the highlights. You just have a lot more to work with. It's basically better quality, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely shoot in RAW. And I actually have a video where I test it out and try to shoot with my iPhone. So if you want to check that out, you can do that right here or right here. Gosh, I don't know. After learning the camera basics, I would start to learn about composition, because once you master how to composite your photos the right way, your photos will just be a lot better and a lot more raw looking. So you have to, now write this down, you have to look up the rule of thirds. It's this grid line and a rule saying that you have to place your subject on the places where the lines cross each other. Don't cut off limbs, and you don't have a horizon in the middle of someone's face. And leading lines, take one at a time. So maybe say you start by choosing the one with the grid, because I think that's the most important one. And then once you've used it a lot and it starts to feel a little bit natural to just use it when you're shooting naturally, that's how it feels to me now. Then you take the next, then you go to maybe don't cut a face with the horizon. And then you just implement that every time there's a horizon that could cut your face. So just take one at a time, because I really think that if you take every single rule there is and just try to apply every single one at once, you won't understand any of them, because it's just a little bit hard. It's very hard. So stick to one and then build on top as you go. Let's move on to the fourth step. The fourth step is editing. I love editing so freaking much. You know why I love editing so much? Because you'll never be satisfied. At least that's the way it is for me, because I feel like editing is something you can always improve on, and you can always, I mean, that's the way it is with everything in photography, but especially in editing. I feel like I'm never satisfied, and you can always go back and change your photos and change the editing and learn new techniques and learn new ways of using color and all that stuff. And I actually only want to give you 2 tips for editing, because otherwise I could be sitting here for hours. And that is to do your editing, learn your editing, but don't over edit. Because I think that is a very common mistake when you're starting out. Is that you just throw a bunch of stuff on top and it just looks blah. And it's almost better not to edit, but also an unedited photo is also just very boring and not very artistic and not very personal, I think. Editing is really the space where you get to make the photo yours, if that makes sense. If you have the money, I would recommend buying some presets from your favorite photographer, maybe if they have some presets for sale. And the important thing here is that you buy them from a photographer whose editing style you really love, because it is very individual and it is a matter of taste. So you might not like the way I edit, but maybe I love the way I edit because I love many colors and stuff like that. And you might hate colors and love desaturated colors and stuff like that. So find a photographer whose editing style you really love, and then see if they maybe have some presets for sale or something like that. Because when you buy the presets, you can apply them to your own images, but then you can also go in to the program and see what the photographer actually did to get that look that you really like. So maybe you can start by going into the basics and see what he did there and how it affects the photo if you turn it off and turn it on and stuff like that. So you can really teach yourself very fast in that way. That's what I did with my favorite photographer in the beginning, and it worked wonders. I still even go back to his presets today when I'm a little bit in doubt. So yeah, it's definitely a very fast way to learn how to edit. And that was it for editing. Let's move on. Step 5, quantity over quality. Or what? Okay, listen very closely. The first maybe 3 months or so, you just go out and you shoot. You don't think at all. You just, okay, maybe you think a little bit, but you just shoot a lot. You shoot all day, every day. You don't spend very much time on each individual photo. You just shoot a lot of photos. And then after the maybe 3 months, I think you'll feel it when it's time. You start slowing down and you start spending more time on each individual photo, but you don't take as many photos. And then as you go, you slow even more down and you spend even more time on each individual photo. Then in the end, you'll probably spend a week on just creating one photo. I think that really is the goal. Almost. It depends on what kind of photography you are into, but I think this technique of learning applies to most kinds of photography. I used this learning technique myself when I started out, but I started slowing down way too late, and that just made me very frustrated because I didn't really feel like I was improving, because I just kept creating and didn't really take the time to slow down for each individual photo. And I mean, it makes sense. If you just spend 10 minutes on a photo, it won't be the best photo you've ever created. It just will be like every other photo. It makes sense that if you spend more time and put more effort into your photo, that it just will look better. But in the beginning, you don't know how to spend the time, probably. So I think it's more important to just create a lot, to learn the camera basics and learn the different rules and stuff like that. So when you're actually slowing down, you know how to spend your time, if that makes sense. And my best photos are definitely one where I drew out this sketch before going to shoot, and where I waited for the sun to set to get the perfect lighting, and where I got my shoes wet because I had to get the perfect angle and stuff like that. So what I want you to take away here is to start out by creating a lot, to just learn the rules and learn the basics and all that stuff. And once you've learned that and you feel comfortable with creating, you start slowing down. And if you can, you slow down a lot in the beginning, because the best photos will come when you slow down and when you really put effort into it. And that is where I fail. So I'm really saying this to you to really, I hope you listen. I really hope this made your path just a little bit more clear. If it did, please give it a like and a comment down below. It would just make me very happy. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below as well. I would love to answer them. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every time I post a new video. Here's my Instagram, and until next time.